Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are talking about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team, and I am joined by Brian Driscoll, who is the owner of the Irish Breakdown, covering Notre Dame for about 15 years now. And Brian, I want to talk before we get into the team this season and look forward. I want to look backward because 2021, Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame. He goes to LSU, and all of a sudden there is a little bit of a panic that kind of goes around with, I don't know if it's a panic, a shock that's going around with everyone that's fans of Notre Dame, the people in the athletic department, like, what do we do now? Who is going to be the person that takes over this job? I was going back today. I was looking at the candidates. They were looking at Luke Fickell before he went to Wisconsin, Matt Campbell at Iowa State. Dave Aranda was really hot back then. But Notre Dame decided to go with the promotion of defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman, which has turned out to be, I could say, better than expected. How did Notre Dame come to that decision to actually hire Marcus Freeman?
Well, it was an interesting process because you had, like, my sources were telling me one thing, and then I'm listening to national people tell me another thing, and it really came down to I think with Jack Swarbrick as the AD at the time, they loved Marcus Freeman in a short time in Notre Dame, and there was already talk during his first year that, hey, this guy might be Brian Kelly's replacement. But the thought being in a couple of years, right? So he would be at Notre Dame a couple of years. Kelly would eventually move on, retire, go to the NFL, get another job. And because everybody knew Brian Kelly was never like a lifer at Notre Dame. I mean, he's tried to get out of Notre Dame 2012, 2016. Like, he's tried to get out of
these jobs?
Jobs he wanted, not people that people would hire him. Like, he interviewed for the Eagles in 2012 after the national title, or actually right before the title game, right after the title game. He tried to get the LSU job in 2016 after Notre Dame went 4-8. Remember then they ended up hiring Ed Orgeron at the time. There's been plenty of times his agent has tried to get him out of Notre Dame. He didn't love it at Notre Dame, but you thought you'd at least get a couple more seasons out of him and then turn it over to Marcus Freeman. So when he left a little bit more maybe abruptly than some people thought, the question was, okay, is Freeman ready? And then also Jack Swarbrick's a very due diligence guy, and so he reached out to, obviously you mentioned Matt Campbell, Luke Fickell. He reached out to Dave Clawson, who was at Wake Forest and still at Wake Forest at the time. There were several people he reached out to. But Freeman was always very much a strong contender, and sources I had in the program said that he was a legitimate contender. And after his first official interview, he became the leader in the clubhouse. And while there was a lot of talk about Luke Fickell, it was really after Freeman's first interview that he was the guy to beat. And one of the spin that I read from a national guy was like, if Notre Dame's willing to wait for Luke Fickell, and I'm like, you don't think Notre Dame would wait 3 weeks to hire the coach they think is the best guy for the job? Like, you really don't think that's what they're going to do? Of course they would. But they felt Marcus Freeman was the best guy for the job, and they took a risk. And they knew it was a risk. I mean, at the time, they knew it was a risk. Guy that's never been a head coach. He's never been a Power 5 defensive coordinator until this past season at Notre Dame. But the minute you meet Marcus Freeman, you see the traits of someone who's going to be a good head football coach. Self-disciplined. He relates well to the players, but not in a way where he's like their buddy, like, what up, bro? Love. It's he's the coach. You're the player, but there's a respect there. I'm going to treat you right, but I'm also going to demand a lot from you. And he's a genuine guy. I mean, he talks to players about life after football. I mean, it's just someone that the players rally to. And you saw that when he was introduced as the head coach in the locker room, how the players went nuts. That was a real reaction from that team. And, of course, you've seen how they play for him since then. And so that was the risk that Jack Swarbrick was willing to take, is I think the traits that I look for are there. All he's lacking is experience. And so he took a risk, and it's certainly so far paid off tremendously well for Notre Dame.
Well, I think everyone that watches him and sees him in interviews, like, could definitely see everything that you just said. And like, he's done a thing too where he is incredibly likable. He's turned into one of the faces of just college football in general. We had Mark Colkin on yesterday, who covers USC. He even admitted to me, he's like, hey, I hated all the other Notre Dame coaches in my lifetime. It's hard to hate Marcus Freeman. This guy is just incredibly likable. And like, I'm just saying, for someone that's 29 years old, I never thought Notre Dame was cool. It was kind of like, all right, you guys are always a good football team, maybe good going on great. But Marcus Freeman's turned this team into just just very likable. He's made them cool again. And it was kind of a question coming in with him, like, hey, is this guy going to be more of a culture guy or is he going to be a recruiter? But it turns out he might just be a damn good football coach and just, both.
He's a great recruiter. There's no question. I mean, you can't watch this team play and not recognize the talent that they've acquired. He is a great motivator. The culture's strong. You see that by the way they've been able to bounce back some adversity, and he's grown as a game day coach. The guy he was in 2022 was not a great game day coach, as we saw. There were even still some mishaps in 2023, like having 10 guys on the field for 2 plays at the end of the game against Ohio State, like that. But as he's evolved and grown and matured, and this is, like I said, the gamble that Jack Swarbrick is willing to take, you see what this program has become. And you watch him in the playoffs, and you're just seeing the 4th down decisions, the fake punt that they did against Georgia, the way they executed it, that was a gutsy call. I mean, if they don't jump off sides and you snap that ball, or if the refs don't call it, you just gave Georgia the football deep in your own territory, but they executed it brilliantly. And you just see so many more of those things. And the interesting thing about Marcus Freeman, why I do think he's hard to dislike, is because you can sense there's a genuineness to him. And look, I'll be honest with you. Like, I talk to a lot of people in the community, and I bump into a lot of people on campus. I had a professor come up to me at a tailgate last year, and she was talking about how she didn't necessarily have all the fondest feelings of past coaches either. She said, she was telling me a story how she bumped into him one time on campus, and the previous head coach just wouldn't talk to people if they didn't, if they weren't someone that he needed to be tight with. And she's like, he stopped, he talked to me, he was genuine. I'll talk to people that say they met him at a restaurant, they met him running, like doing a workout, they've met his wife. And every time they talk about it, they're like, he was so nice, he was so genuine, she was so nice, she was so genuine. And so, like, what you see is what you get. But what I don't think people do see is the guy on the practice field, the guy on the game field, that is very intense. And I keep telling people, like, guys, he's a very nice, polite, respectful guy. He's also a former Big Ten middle linebacker that was an all Big Ten middle linebacker. He's a lot like Manti Te'o. If you ever met Manti off the field, you're like, what a nice guy, what a really nice guy. And then you see him on the field, and you're like, this guy, I don't want to have to go toe to toe with this guy on the field. And that's how Marcus Freeman is. And you see that on the practice field when we're at practice. And his first year and his first couple years, really, I think he tried to act like what he perceived a head coach to be calm. And eventually I just think he realized and was like, screw it, I'm going to be me. And now you see a much more intense and much more animated guy, because that's more of his demeanor. But when he's calm and polite and friendly in a press conference, that's also him. And so I just think people see a guy that's genuine. And you may hate Notre Dame, but you're like, yeah, I hate Notre Dame still, but he seems like a good dude. I'd want him coaching my team. And I don't know if a lot of people felt that about the last couple head coaches at Notre Dame for very different reasons.
The thing about coaches just learning and getting better, I think that's something that a lot of us football fans or just sports fans in general, we don't allow coaches to do that, or we don't think that over time coaches just can get better, that they can learn from their mistakes, that they can develop, that they can become more polished. And I just think that's a great point by you for bringing that up. Well, why don't we talk about this year's team, the team that Marcus Freeman has built and they're going to be putting on the field this year. I want to start with the offense. You look at last season, Riley Leonard's the quarterback. You got Love, the running back, who's a Heisman Trophy candidate. You got Jadarian Price, who is a beast. Combined, these guys last year are running for 41 touchdowns, 2,800 rushing yards. Is this offense going to be a more of a run-heavy offense again, because you are going to be having a quarterback, whoever it's going to be, that doesn't have that much experience? Or is this maybe going to be a team that's trying to be more balanced on that side of the ball?
Well, when you have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams and Nolan James Jr., I mean, this is the deepest backfield in college football. You're going to be a team that focuses on wanting to run the football. And Marcus Freeman has always said, we are going to be a team that runs the football. But there's being a team that runs the football, and then there's being a run-dominant team. And last year they were a run-dominant team. It was who they were. What they want to be is a team that has more balance. Yes, we're going to come out and establish the run game every week. That's our goal. but we can hurt you at the pass. If you want to build your game plan around stopping our pass game, we're going to hurt you and make you pay, which is why this offseason they went out and got Malachi Fields from Virginia. It's why they went out and got Will Pauling. It's why they just signed – well, they didn't sign. They just landed 5 receivers in the class of 2026, including Caden Finley, whose dad is a former Texas great at tight end. And they clearly want to be a team that's more balanced, because Marcus Freeman understands that if you want to win a college football a national championship in college football, you can't just be a one-trick pony. You've got to be able to hurt teams in different ways, unless your talent is so elite that you've got Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Joe Burrow, and everybody knows you're going to throw, and there's just nothing they can do about it. Those teams come along once every, 20 years? And so, you have 01 Miami, 19 USC, LSU, so 18 years apart. So I just think it's a situation we understand. We've got to be efficient and explosive in every phase of the game. And that's why they've recruited the quarterbacks they've recruited. And what I think made last year successful is Mike Denbrock did a great job of saying, this is the talent I have. Let me build an offense around it. And he does something that I believe all coaches should do, which is coach what you have, recruit what you want. And so he coached Riley Leonard the way he knew Riley Leonard could thrive, but he's out there recruiting, guys like Noah Grubbs and Teddy Gerard and Blake Hebert, and then obviously trying to build up Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr, because that's what he wants, a guy that can throw the football, but they didn't have that last year. At least not throw the football the way that these quarterbacks can. And so that's what they're striving for. It's just, you want to take our run game away, we're going to make you pay for it. And they want to be a more explosive offense. I mean, this is a guy that 2 years ago, coached the best offense in college football, and they ran the ball. And the quarterback ran for 1,000 yards, but they also threw the ball a ton. And that's ultimately where Mike Denbrock wants to be. You don't bring Mike Denbrock into Notre Dame if your goal is to just be a ground and pound team.
I'm looking at the receiving core for this Notre Dame team. You had Jaden Greathouse, who was just incredible in the college football playoff. You got Faison, who's returning. You went in the transfer portal and got Malachi Fields, who was a 4-year guy at Virginia. You got Raridon, the tight end, who's battled some injuries. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list that I was reading about him and his, just freakish athletic ability that he has. Is it going to be something too where, even though we do have a younger quarterback that doesn't have that much experience, just the fact that you're seeing a lot of these younger receivers who were young, had a lot of experience last year, now developing, becoming the veterans on the team, that you just feel safer throwing the ball than maybe you did in previous years, even though you did have a veteran quarterback last year?
I mean, you don't need the quarterback to carry the team the same way. It's like, dude, just read the defense and get the ball where it needs to go. Like you said, it's not, well, we have to get the ball to this guy. We have to get the ball to that guy. It's just read the defense. It's, you talked about Eli Raridon being on Feldman's freaks list. Well, both of their transfer receivers, Malachi Fields and Will Pauling, were on his freaks list last year in 2024. So you just gave your new quarterback 3 freaks. And oh, by the way, the biggest freak in all of college football who wasn't on that list, I understand why, but he still should have been, is Jeremiah Love. So, I mean, it's one of those things where if you're going to have a young quarterback, you better surround him with proven players and talented players. And that's what Notre Dame is going to have. I mean, everybody talks about Jaden Greathouse and how good he was in the semifinals and the championship game. And he was brilliant. Their best receiver the first 2 games of the playoffs was Jordan Faison, like who you mentioned earlier. So it's just about putting that talent around him. Hopefully the offensive line, which went into last year with 6 career starts, now has over 50. They've got to do better in pass pro, give the quarterbacks more time, but it just goes back to the point we talked about, which is, yes, they're still going to build the offense around Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, but they're trying to win a championship. And to do that, you've got to be more balanced. I mean, that's what Ohio State did last year, right? I mean, they torched Oregon and Tennessee through the air. Best thing they did against Notre Dame, and people remember that big, long play at the end, but what hurt Notre Dame more in that game was they ran the ball all over Notre Dame in that game. And their balance in that game just gave Notre Dame fits. And that's what Notre Dame has been trying to get to, and that's why Mike Denbrock was brought in to run this offense.
We can talk about the defense a little bit now. The defense was, even though you said, Ohio State was able to take advantage on the ground a little bit against Notre Dame, defense was the overwhelming strength of this team last year. I think that's the reason that they are able to, just dominate Indiana in the first game, held Georgia to 10 points. Penn State's receivers in the semifinal aren't even getting open, can't even catch any passes. Al Golden was the coordinator last year. He leaves. He goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. Is there a reason to be concerned that this defense might even take a step back? Or is it just a thing where this team's just oozing with talent and you got Marcus Freeman, defensive head coach? It might not matter that you lose a very good coordinator.
I could give you the homer take and be like, no, it won't matter. They're super talented and Marcus Freeman and all that. But I mean, I like to keep it real and talk football. And that is, yes, they are very talented. Yes, Marcus Freeman is here. Yes, they do return everyone else on the staff. But at the end of the day, you can't say Al Golden was a great coach, which I think he was, and then act like it's no big deal to lose him. The job of Marcus Freeman when you lose a great coach is to replace him with an equal caliber coach. You lose Dylan McCullough at running backs coach, who's arguably the best running backs coach in the country. So what do? You go steal Penn State's running backs coach, who obviously coached 2,000-yard receivers. That's what great coaches do. That's, I mean, Nick Saban, you don't lose the coaches that he's lost over time and keep winning if you don't replace them. You want to talk about one of the things that caused Dabo Swinney to struggle after the 2020, after Trevor Lawrence left. I've said he made bad hires. And he wasn't quick enough to overcome, to admit those mistakes. And what Marcus Freeman has done is said, look, here's somebody I trust. Here's someone that's won a championship as a defensive coordinator, someone that's been in the NFL the last few years, which is something that Marcus Freeman values because he sees where the game is going, where the college game is always a little bit behind the NFL. And what's been in the NFL is situational football, sub packages, playing different types of defense. You don't just line up in your base defense anymore. And that's something he's been working to. That's part of the reason he went and got Al Golden, and that's what he sees in Chris Ash. But I love what I've seen from Chris Ash in preparation and how he's teaching. But at the end of the day, can he put a defensive game plan together as well as Al Golden? Can he have players as disciplined as Al Golden? Can he make in-game adjustments as well as Al Golden? Those are all things that we need to see. And I could be a homer and be like, I'm not worried about it at all. But until we see it, it's honestly fair to question it. The thing that gives me comfort is, as Larry Coker proved at Miami, if your roster's good enough, it may take you a while to ruin it. And I think that's what should help out Chris Ash is he's got a very talented roster. And what I also like about what Chris Ash has done is he hasn't come in and be like, screw Al Golden, I'm Chris Ash, we're going to do it my way. He's taken things that they've done well, we're going to build around that, and then I'm going to also add some tweaks that I believe in and build that way. And I think that's been smart. You don't just come in and start, tearing everything down from a coach these players respect and who did a great job. You build on it. And that's what Chris Ash has done so far. But we won't know until August 31st and September 13th and games like that if this is going to work out well. But so far, so good. But you lose a great coach, it's always a question mark until you see the other guy can handle the job as well as he did.
That's a really good saying that you had there of Larry Coker. It takes a while to ruin a great roster.
3 years to ruin Miami, right? I mean, he walked into such a great situation. Even a bad coach, doesn't immediately turn it. I mean, Mark Helfrich, look, I think we learned by the end of his Oregon career who he was.
Yeah.
But it took a while to get there because he inherited such a great situation from Chip Kelly. It takes you a while sometimes to ruin a program. So I don't think that's going to happen to Chris Ash. I'm just saying, they're not going to take a big step back just because of the talent. But whether or not they can keep it rolling or get even better, that's going to be determined by how good of a coach Chris Ash is.
Yeah, I believe Chris Ash said he doesn't have to rebuild anything, which is great. He just wants to enhance it and make it better, which I think is the perfect approach to handle with all of this stuff. And I'm looking at the defense right now, and it just seems like the strength of the team is up front, and that is what you want to do if you're going to be competing in a college football playoff against the best teams in the country. When you're playing Miami, that's got a terrific offensive line. At the beginning of the year, they're coached by an offensive line coach. You're playing Texas A&M, that's got SEC bodies up front too. How important is it?
Can you line as well?
Who?
Very experienced offensive line as well at A&M.
Yeah, exactly. And year two under Mike Elko, we did a video about Texas A&M a few weeks ago. I think they can be a very good team headed into the SEC this year. It's gonna, potentially two teams in the week 2 of the season could be playing in the college football playoff. Can you tell me a little bit though, getting back to the defensive line, who are some of the guys up front for Notre Dame that are going to be, terrorizing all of the little ACC teams on their schedule this year?
I'm going to make a little joke here to begin first, but I think the two most important people for the Notre Dame defensive line are Lauren Lando and Rob Hunt. That's their strength coach and their trainer. They got to keep these guys healthy. I mean, that was the big thing that killed them last year. Is you think about the defensive line that Notre Dame took into the championship game. No Riley Mills because of an injury. No Boubacar Traore, who was like, if you take Boubacar's pass rush numbers on Pro Football Focus and expand that for what he did those first 4 games through the entire season, he's putting up Abdul Carter numbers, that's how good he was beginning of the season. You lose him in game 5. He stepped in for the guy that started in front of him, Jordan Patel, who they lost in game 3. Jason Onye goes out for the season after game 6. And then Howard Cross was banged up. He suffered an injury against Florida State. So the big thing is they got to stay healthier than last year. And you kind of hope that they got all the bad luck out of the way in this year, and then maybe they can be healthy this year. But getting Boubacar Traore back healthy is going to be key. He's a 6'4", 250-pound kid, 35-plus-inch arms, super twitchy off the line. And you've got Bryce Young, who's going into a sophomore year as a freak. He was also on the
not the quarterback,
list.
the defensive lineman.
He looks very different, 6'7", 270, a little bit bigger than the other Bryce Young. But Dad's an NFL Hall of Famer. He was an All-American at Notre Dame as a defensive tackle. He's a freaky athlete at 6'7", 270, playing defensive end. You've got Josh Burnham coming back. What you lacked last year, and you saw this against Penn State, you saw this against Ohio State, was Notre Dame couldn't just pin their ears back and say, go get them, line, because they just weren't healthy enough. They were missing some of their elite pass rushers, or at least the high-level talent. And that's what they need to get if they're going to be able to consistently run the table. And even if they're good enough to get through the regular season, as we saw last year, is it going to be good enough to beat Texas? Is it going to be good enough to beat Ohio State, to beat Oregon, to beat the teams that you need to beat to win a championship? That's going to be a question mark for Notre Dame. There's a lot of talent there, but it's talent that hasn't proven that it can do it consistently and over time. I thought the D-line dominated Georgia. Then you see the Penn State game. First half of the game, Penn State dominates. Second half of the game, Notre Dame dominated. And then Ohio State, they just kind of got whipped for most of the game. So that consistency's got to improve. They were also a very young team last year. They're going to be a lot more experienced this year. I don't think people realize, because they see like Riley was a senior and Xavier Watts was a 5th-year senior, Howard Cross a 6th-year senior. They see that and they think, oh, Notre Dame was experienced. Like, no, that was your experience. So there's a reason Notre Dame only had 6 guys get drafted. It's because everybody else came back. And I think that's something that people have to understand. Like Leonard Moore's a true freshman, Christian Gray was a true sophomore, Drake Bowen's a true sophomore, Don Schuler was a redshirt freshman, Boubacar Traore is a redshirt freshman, Josh Burnham's a redshirt sophomore that was making the move from linebacker. This is a very young defense outside of a couple veterans. And now those guys have a lot of experience. And now it's time for them to take their game to another level. The talent's there. They just have to elevate their games if this D-line is going to be championship caliber. And I think if they're healthy, it will be.
Following Notre Dame last year too, it just felt like every time you just kept, because injuries just kept happening like every single time on both both lines too. Because I know the offensive line suffered a few big injuries too, and you're like, this is going to be a really big blow for Notre Dame. I don't know how they can bounce back for this. Like, this is going to be hurting, and it felt like every single time a backup came in and performed pretty well. And you didn't necessarily see that big of a loss, but you saw it, like you said, in the national championship game. That's when you really started to see some of these losses, some of this inexperience from some of these younger guys that came in, but they're all coming back, or a lot of these guys are coming back. So you got to be super high on just, the returning talent on this team.
Well, like that's what worked for Ohio State last year is they were talented.
Yes.
They weren't just some like savvy team that won with set. No, they were a veteran team that was very talented. And that's what allows you to get through that four game grind in the playoff is like, we can just out athlete you, but we also are going to, we've been around the block a few times and Notre Dame is hoping that that's who they are this year after the season they had last year. But man, the injuries last season were rough, but to your point, they're blessings in disguise in 2025 because they force so many guys into action that otherwise maybe wouldn't have played as much. And so now you have Bryce Young playing more this year than he would have last year. You did get a chance to see Junior Tuihalamaka, who was ironic. So he has the big sack against Georgia. He has the fumble recovery against Georgia that were huge plays. He played 0 defensive snaps in the first 2 games of the year. because he was like third string defensive end. But then Jordan Patelho gets hurt, and then Josh Burnham got hurt, and he got hurt against Northern Illinois. He didn't come back until the Stanford game. And then Boubacar Traore goes down, Jason Onya goes down, and then that forced Junior in the starting lineup, and he steps up, and first game he plays, he picks a pass off, and then he did in the playoffs. So you had so many of these guys get forced into the rotation. Donovan Hinish doesn't play a whole lot early. Cross goes down. He steps in and has like 4.5 sacks down the stretch of the season last year. And so you saw this next man up mentality, but it's not just you're putting in try-hard guys. Like you're putting in talented football players. And that's evidence of what we said at the beginning, which is Marcus Freeman's recruiting his tail off. He's not going out there getting those really smart kids that aren't athletes, but they're getting out there, they're trying really hard, and they're giving you the best that they have. They're undersized, they're not great athletes. He's going out there, they are super long, they're super athletic, and they also are smart, and they're big time football players, and that's what's allowed Notre Dame to thrive. When I say Marcus Freeman, I'm referring to him and his staff, because he's not out there doing it by himself. He put together a great staff, which is the job of a head coach, and they've gone out there and just really done a great job of acquiring talent. And like you watch Notre Dame against Georgia last year, and there's some areas, some battles Notre Dame won, some battles Georgia won, but the one thing anyone that's being honest and objective with themselves and honest with themselves will be able to look at and say, that's a different caliber of athlete at Notre Dame than what they had when they played Bama in 2012 and Bama in 2020. Where I've said this about Notre Dame in 2012. I'll take Notre Dame's 5 best guys and stack them up against anybody Alabama had in their top 5. I mean, we're talking about Tyler Eifert, Manti, Zach Martin, who's a Hall of Famer, Capron Lewis Moore, Stephon Tuitt, those guys like that. The difference was 6 through 20, Bama dominated Notre Dame's players. And I'll say the same thing about 2020. I mean, they had Michael Mayer and Kyle Hamilton, Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa. The difference is 6 through 20, they dominated. Well, now Notre Dame's becoming that team where, their top 5 guys are also good, but they're 11, they're 15, they're 18, they're 25, they're 30 are also ball players. So when they lose a guy like a Boubacar Traore, they're putting in Junior Tuilamaka, who's a former top 150 overall recruit, 4-star player that decommitted from USC. They're not putting in a walk-on. They're putting in a guy that's a talented football player. They can lose a Benjamin Morrison for the season, and nobody talks about the fact that they lost him after the 6th game. It was a preseason All-American because who steps in? Leonard Moore, who becomes the defensive freshman of the year. That's the difference between this Marcus Freeman team in the past, where you'd have a star like Jalen Smith. He's got Joe Schmidt next to him, who's a great kid, try-hard guy, but he's a former walk-on. You talk about Manti Te'o, but he's got Dan Fox next to him. Nice, solid player, but not a guy that should be starting on a team playing for a championship. Now, it's like you've got a guy like Drake Bowen, and who's next to him? Jalen Sneed, Jaden Alsbury, Kingston Villamasa. You can lose a Benjamin Morrison and step in and have a guy just as good. And that's the difference between this Notre Dame team. When Notre Dame played Georgia in 2019, I remember by the end of the first drive, Georgia had lost both their starting corners. Their one starting corner was out, and then Eric Stokes got hurt in like the first drive of the game. And they didn't miss a beat because they're just putting some other stud in there. And that's where Notre Dame wanted to get to under Marcus Freeman, and that's what they're very close to being. I don't know if they're that way at every position, but they're that way at a lot more positions than they have been in the past.
We've been gushing about Marcus Freeman a lot on this podcast so far, and rightfully so. The playoff run was impressive. The way he's built this Notre Dame team has been very impressive. You're obviously incredibly high on him. It feels like the entire, Notre Dame fan base is incredibly high on him. But I do remember last year, start off the season, good win against Texas A&M, going down to College Station, winning down there, very tough environment. And then the next week, lay an egg, 16-14 against Northern Illinois. This made people bring up the Marshall loss in his first full year coaching at Notre Dame. Even though the playoff went well, even though we see Marcus Freeman, always have his team prepared for very big games, is there still little things in the back of your mind and maybe Notre Dame fans' minds that like, hey, we have to be a little bit worried if we're playing a Purdue this year or a Stanford this year, just because sometimes, some of these, games that Notre Dame should be winning by 80 points, a few times in his tenure, they have played down to their competition.
I think I'll say this, and nobody wants to hear this because they look at Marshall and Northern Illinois, and they're like, well, they're not Power 5 teams. The worst loss Marcus Freeman had was against Stanford in 2022. That was a terrible Stanford team. And they're not losing to teams like that now. It's teams like Northern Illinois, teams like Louisville, teams like Clemson in 2023 that are solid teams but have no business beating you. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know if that's behind them. What gave me hope that it is because in his first 2 years at Notre Dame, it would look like they'd turn a corner and then they'd drop another one. So, like, they have that bad loss to Marshall. They bounce back with an ugly win the next week at Cal, but then they go on the road and they annihilate Drake May in North Carolina. And the final score was like 45-32. They had like 2 garbage touchdowns in the last 5 minutes. That game was over like in halftime. Then the next week they go out to LA or out to Las Vegas and just outplay BYU. And you're thinking, okay, they've turned the corner. And then they fall to Stanford. And then they roll, and you look at like 2023, they have that bad loss to Louisville. They come out the next week and destroy a top 10 USC team and just make Caleb Williams look like an undrafted free agent. I mean, the way he played that game. And then they just blow Pitt out of, just 58-7, annihilate Pitt. And then you drop the game to Clemson. And it would get frustrating. And then they bounce back from that, and they destroy Wake Forest. They destroy Stanford. They destroy Oregon State. And then you have Stanford. You get that big, Northern Illinois. You have that great win over A&M, and then Northern Illinois. But the reason that I'm confident it's behind them is because that didn't happen again. And the closest game they played the rest of the year was a 7-point win over Louisville, where Notre Dame never trailed after the first quarter and had a 14-point lead over Louisville in the fourth quarter. And then the next closest game they played was a game against USC, where USC was close to tying it, but USC never led that game. Notre Dame led the entire game. And USC's 6 losses last year, they led in the fourth quarter of every game but one, and that was Notre Dame. They blow out Georgia Tech. Didn't he play that well and beat Georgia Tech 31-7? Blow out Florida State, blow out Army, blow out Navy. You didn't have that letdown game again. There were certainly candidates. You blow out Stanford, so you think when you string 13 in a row, you kind of think that's behind you. But at the end of the day, you don't really know that until you see it. And that's the thing we've talked about on our show, James, is I think Marcus Freeman has turned the corner, and he doesn't make the same mistakes twice very often. But at the same time, you also have to say, but now he's got something else to prove, which is, okay, great, you did that, took him to the championship game. Well, Brian Kelly did that in 2012. Brian Kelly took him to the playoff in 18 and 20, but what Brian Kelly could never do is follow up with an equally good season or even a better season. You go 12-1 in 2012. The next year you go 9-4. You lose to some mediocre teams. You underachieve. You beat Rutgers in a bowl game. Whoop-de-doo. And then you go the next year they go 8-5. Then they have the great 2015 season. Then they go 4-8. And then they have the playoff team in 2018. They went 11-2 the next year, but it was an ugly 11-2 where they got beat by Georgia. Michigan killed them. They beat one ranked team all year, Navy. And it just was like you never were like, they just never built on that strong season. That's what Marcus Freeman has to prove that he can do. And I can tell you until I'm blue in the face that, no, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. He's got to show it, though. I just would say that when you look at the staff he's put together, when you look at the roster he's put together, there's a greater sense of confidence because I can watch this team and I can compare it to the teams that Brian Kelly had that I evaluate. I was here covering and say that this team is different. This team has a bigger margin for error. And I think that Marcus Freeman's learned some of those lessons because, you thought that the Northern Illinois thing would wear off after a while. Hey, they've won 9 games, 10 games, 11 games. They never let it go. And that's what the mentality they've had this offseason about the Ohio State game. They're not – Notre Dame's players and coaches do not have what a great year. We're just happy we got that far. But they're pissed that they didn't win that game. And that's kind of been the thing that's fueled them all offseason. So I don't think they look at it as we've arrived. They said, hey, this is Notre Dame. We didn't meet the standard that we've set for ourselves, which is to win all of our games. And that's what they've got to prove. And now he's got to go prove that he can get him to do that. Because ultimately, You can think Marcus Freeman's the greatest guy in the world, and I think he's a great guy. You can think he's a heck of a football coach, but there's one standard at Notre Dame for head football coach: win championships. And he's got to prove that he can do that.
The reality is probably that some of those games were just kind of like, fluke upsets. We've seen Nick Saban get upset. We've seen Kirby Smart get upset. We've seen all of the great coaches in all of college football get upset. Just as long as it's not like an every year type of thing, I think it'll be okay. But I just had to ask the question to start off here.
But it's a fair question, though, because it's not just one game. Everybody, like Nick Saban lost to Louisiana Monroe in his first year at Alabama, but he didn't lose another one to a comparable team 2 years later. So I think it's a very fair thing to bring up. I'm not someone who ducks the Northern Illinois game, and I'll say, look, that's not even his worst loss. Stanford was in 2022. I mean, when they lost to Stanford in 22, Stanford had not beaten let me be clear. They had not beaten an FBS opponent in over a calendar year. The only team they beat since their last win was Colgate. And, but we don't see another game like that. People forget Marshall was a 10-win football team, and that was Marcus Freeman's second game. But, you do need to put those things behind you, but I don't know that it's as big of a deal in a 12-team playoff as they showed last year. You can lose a game like that, and as long as you handle your business the rest of the games, you're still going to playoff. And then you get to prove if you're legitimately a good team or not. And last year they did.
Give credit to Marshall, 10-win team, like you just said there. I'm a Iowa State fan. We've lost to some G5 teams, and we always have to point out their records at the end of the year. That's what we have.
Yeah,
we've had to do that.
Who
before.
was it? Did Iowa State or Iowa lost like North Dakota State a couple years ago? I'm like, guys, they could be a 500 team in the Big Ten. Like, let's not act like this isn't a really good football team with NFL players on it.
We lost to Ohio. We lost to Louisiana when we won the Fiesta Bowl in 2020.
I'm trying to stick up for you here, man. I'm trying to make you feel better.
Well, that's the thing at Iowa State. It's like there's been a little bit of a starting slow thing there, but I do think I might throw a few dollars on that Purdue game then. I'm going to ask you one final question.
Let me say that's not the game. If I were you, I'd be putting money on like NC State, maybe Pitt, maybe Boston College, maybe. The Purdue game will not be competitive. Unless it's like a 30-something spread, I would not put money on Purdue.
Okay. Well, I'll take your word for it then.
Yeah.
One last question I'll ask you, and then we'll head out of here. I'm just looking at this Notre Dame schedule heading into this year. Start off the season at Miami, and then you follow that up with a game at home against Texas A&M. Which one of those games are you more worried about for Notre Dame heading into this year? Because you're obviously going on the road week one, but then you're following up a really tough opponent in Miami with another really tough opponent in Texas A&M.
Look, Notre Dame can lose both of those games. Those are two very good football teams that are more than capable of beating Notre Dame. So the way I answer that question is it's not that there's not one that I'm more worried about because I don't play or coach at Notre Dame, so it's not that I'm worried about it, but I would say the toughest matchup is Texas A&M. And the reason I say that is Miami's good in the trenches, A&M's really good in the trenches. I think A&M has a quarterback that's going into year two of the system. I think A&M's a bigger team. They're a physical team. I think they're going to be some of the mistakes that cost them some games last year. I don't think they're going to make in year two of Mike Elko's tenure. I think getting in year two of the Colin Klein system is important. They went out and got receivers that fit what he wants to do. Like last year, they had good receivers. Noah Thomas is a talented kid. Ja'Day Walker is a talented kid. But that doesn't fit Colin Klein's system. I mean, you've seen his system. Like, what did he always have at Kansas State? Some small, shifty, fast, get the ball in his hands guy that they could run their RPO game with, right? Is that not what Colin Klein did as a quarterback and a coordinator at Kansas State? So they went out there and got guys like that. They had Terry Bussey, but they went out and got the Mario Craver kid from Mississippi State, who's a 5'10" burner. They went out and got Casey Concepcion, who's a shifty, short catch, intermediate, move the chains, guy that could do some damage after the catch. Those guys fit the system. And the mistake that I think Colin Klein made last year was he did not do what Mike Denbrock did, which is coach what you have, recruit what you want. He tried to coach what he wanted, and he didn't have the guys for that. But now he does. And they've got as deep of a backfield as you're going to find outside of South Bend, Indiana. They got three really good running backs. I love the line. Their receivers fit the system. I think their secondary is real solid. They've got an outstanding linebacking core in Torrin York and Solomon Williams. So I just look at it and I think that's a team with less holes. And I think that makes it a tougher matchup, even though the Miami game is on the road. I just think in game one with a brand new secondary, a brand new receiving core, a brand new defensive coordinator, a brand new quarterback. Yes, he's a veteran, but he's brand new to Miami. That game is more of Miami can win if Notre Dame doesn't play well, where A&M can beat you. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? One difference is like you can lose to Miami. Like Northern Illinois didn't beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame didn't play well, and then A&M Northern Illinois took advantage. The games that you get worried about are the ones where we could play well and still lose to this team, and that's what I think A&M is. Notre Dame's going to have to bring their A game to beat A&M, just like A&M's going to have to bring their A game to beat Notre Dame. I think that's the toughest matchup of really their entire schedule, in my opinion.
Absolutely, man. Like we talked to a guy who covers Texas A&M for 24/7 Sports maybe like 3-4 weeks ago, and just going through all of the stuff with that team and the things that they fixed, like they're gonna be they're gonna be flirting with a playoff spot. If they're not, something went terribly wrong for.
Yeah, I have them in.
Yeah,
we're going to do
crazy.
our full official playoff bracket next week, but there's two things that benefit A&M. One is they're talented, but number two, their schedule, while hard, is not as nuts as like Georgia and LSU schedule, which I think is going to help them, manage it at the end of the year. And if they can if they can play a 4-quarter game with Notre Dame where it's close the entire game, kind of like it was last year, I think this team could be a 10-2 getting into the playoff team. I really do. I like this A&M team. And part of that's I watched what Mike Elko did at Duke, and I'm like, you got to give that guy a second year. And as long as the kids buy in, and it sounds like there's more buy-in this year, then I think he's going to do really well. I think A&M and Alabama are the two teams that I see in the SEC having the big jump that everybody thinks LSU is going to have this year.
And Mike Elko, Marcus Freeman are like quarterback Eskimo brothers with Riley Leonard, so definitely have the same type in quarterback.
There's the Notre Dame connection. Mike Elko played a big role in turning around Notre Dame after the 2016 season. He was their D coordinator in 2017, and he's another guy who's someone that I've actually got to know in this profession, and he's a good guy. He's a hard worker. He's a good dad, good husband, and cares about his players. And I think the longer the kids are in the system, the more they're going to buy into it. And then it's like, okay, but you have talented players. Well, if you look at that roster, it's like, yeah, they do. So they're going to be a good football team.
He's another guy too, where it's like him getting hired at Texas A&M. He wasn't like the sexy hire or anything like that, but he was the smart hire.
They wanted Mark Stoops. Remember that? They wanted to hire Mark Stoops before Mike Elko. Sometimes things work out correctly. It's like USC. I think Pete Carroll was their 5th option.
Yep.
Like they've been turned down by like 4 guys.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works out, where you don't get the guy you wanted, but the guy you got ends up being the right hire. And I think that's going to be true for Texas A&M when Mike Elko's career is done.
Absolutely. He'll get them past the 8-4 Twitter joke right now.
The bar for that's pretty low. I honestly think that, just my opinion, my prediction, I think when he's done, they're going to look a lot more like R.C. Slocum, Texas A&M than what we saw under Jimbo Fisher. That's
absolutely.
My opinion. A perennial 9-10 plus team that every 3rd or 4th year you look at and say, boy, that team has a chance to win it all. I truly believe he's going to do, because he can recruit and he can coach. So I could be wrong on that, but that's where I see that program projecting. Because have you seen what they're doing in the 26 recruiting class? Their talent's not going down. They're going to get some dudes. And
that oil money.
I think he's going to do well there. Yeah. No. Hey, you know what? That's the rules now. So hey, use it. A&M's been paying players for decades. Now it's legal. So get it done. But I think he's going to do really well there.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Brian, this has been great. Can probably talk football with you for hours. Do you want to tell us where we can find all of your guys' content and where people can sign up for your guys' insider knowledge, and then we'll head out of here?
So obviously, find our podcast, whatever platform podcast you listen to. You can find out, just type in Irish Breakdown, 2 words, and like it sounds. You can also check out our YouTube channel at Irish Breakdown. Just go to your YouTube page, type in Irish Breakdown. You'll see us there. You'll see that logo right there. And then if you want to get our premium content, and we do have some non-Notre Dame fans on there, but also if you're a Notre Dame fan, we have a message board where we put breakdowns, film breakdowns, analysis, intel. You can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. $6.99 a month, $69.99 for a year. It's still the best value you're going to get. And we're going to be laying out a brand new content plan for the season coming up here soon too. So looking forward to it. It's going to be going to be a really fun year.
Heck yes, man. Go check him out. Thank you for watching this episode here today. Please like this video if you liked this conversation that we just had. Leave a comment with your thoughts, what you think Notre Dame's going to do this year, what you think is going to happen the college football year as a whole. Feel free to check out other content. We talked about USC the other day. We've done a few different breakdowns of football preseason, just discussion, teams, schedules like this all summer long. So go ahead and check that stuff out, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you for watching.